This happened about 4 months ago, and I haven't been back to Derek's house since. My name is Alex, and I'm a 27-year-old accountant living in Milwaukee. Derek and I have been best friends since college. We played on the same intramural basketball team, pledged the same fraternity, and stayed close even after graduation. When he bought his first house last year, I was one of the first people he invited over to see it. The house was in an older neighborhood on the east side of Milwaukee. Built in the 1920s, Derek said. It needed some work, but it had character. High ceilings, original hardwood floors, a big backyard, and the price was right. Derek got it for way under market value because the previous owner had been in a hurry to sell. At the time, we joked about it being a steal. Looking back, I wish I'd asked more questions about why someone would be so desperate to leave. Derek moved in around March. For the first few months, everything seemed fine. He'd have people over for game nights. We'd grill in the backyard on weekends. It was a bachelor pad in the best sense. Messy but comfortable. Exactly what you'd expect from a 28-year-old guy living alone for the first time. But around July, I started noticing changes in Derek. He looked tired all the time, dark circles under his eyes. He'd lose his train of thought mid-conversation. Zone out. When I'd ask if he was okay, he'd just say he hadn't been sleeping well, that the house made a lot of noises at night and he was still getting used to it. Old houses do make noises. I didn't think much of it at first, but then Derek started canceling plans. He'd bail on basketball games at the last minute. Skip happy hour with our friend group. Always with some excuse about needing to take care of things at the house. When I'd offered to help with whatever project he was working on, he'd decline. Said it was just boring maintenance stuff. This went on for about a month. By August, I'd barely seen Derek except for the occasional text message. Our mutual friends were getting worried too. Someone suggested maybe Derek was depressed, going through something personal. We decided I should go check on him. I showed up at his house on a Saturday afternoon in mid-August, unannounced. I figured if I called first, he'd just tell me not to come. When I knocked on the door, it took him almost 5 minutes to answer. When he finally did, I was shocked by how he looked. Derek had lost weight, a lot of weight. His clothes hung off him, his face was gaunt, and his eyes had this hollow, exhausted look, like he hadn't really slept in weeks. I asked him what the hell was going on. He tried to brush it off, said he'd just been busy, not eating enough, working too much, but I didn't buy it. I pushed my way inside, insisting we talk. The house looked different than the last time I'd been there. It was a mess, but not in the normal way. There were papers everywhere, notes, drawings, all over the coffee table, the couch, the floor. I picked up one of the papers. It was a hand-drawn floor plan of the house, with measurements, calculations, notes in Derek's handwriting. I asked what all this was. Derek said he'd been trying to figure something out about the house, something that didn't make sense. He led me to the kitchen and pointed to the basement door. It was a normal-looking door, painted white. Old brass doorknob, nothing special about it. Derek said the basement was bothering him, that the dimensions didn't add up. He'd measured the house from the outside, measured each room on the main floor. And when he calculated the total square footage, it was significantly more than what the basement space should be, like there was a room down there that wasn't accessible. I told him old houses were weird, that basements got renovated over the years, walls added or removed, but Derek shook his head. He said he'd been in the basement dozens of times. There were no signs of renovation, no sealed doorways, no obvious places where a room could be hidden. But the math didn't lie. There was space missing. I suggested we go down and look together, get a fresh set of eyes on it. Derek hesitated, said he didn't like going down there, that something about the basement felt wrong. But he finally agreed, and we opened the basement door. The stairs leading down were old and wooden. They creaked with each step. The basement itself was unfinished. Concrete floor, exposed beams, old furnace in the corner. Typical basement stuff. There were some boxes stacked against one wall, an old workbench. Nothing unusual. But Derek was right about the dimensions. I'm not an architect or anything, but even I could see it. The basement was smaller than it should be. The far wall, opposite the stairs, seemed too close. Like there should be another 15 or 20 feet of space beyond it. I walked over to that wall, knocked on it. It sounded solid. Concrete or brick behind the drywall, probably. I asked Derek if he'd checked behind the drywall. He said no, that he'd been too scared to. I asked why, and he didn't answer right away. Then he told me about the sounds. He said that at night, around 2 or 3 in the morning, he'd hear noises coming from the basement. Scratching, thumping, like something was moving around down there. He'd come down to check multiple times. Never found anything. But the sounds kept happening. And then there were the dreams. Derek said he'd been having the same nightmare for weeks. In the dream, he'd be in the basement, standing in front of that far wall, and the wall would start to crack. Something would push through from the other side. He'd wake up before he could see what it was, but the dream felt vivid, real. I told him he was probably just stressed, that his mind was playing tricks on him because he'd fixated on this missing space thing. But even as I said it, I felt uncomfortable. There was something about that basement, a heaviness in the air, a coldness that had nothing to do with temperature. I suggested we cut a hole in the drywall, see what was behind it. Settle this once and for all. Derek looked terrified at the suggestion, but he also looked relieved, like he'd been waiting for someone to give him permission to find out. We went to the hardware store, bought a drywall saw and some other tools, came back to the house. Derek wanted to wait until the next day, but I insisted we do it now. Get it over with. He reluctantly agreed. We went back down to the basement. I marked a square on the drywall about 2 feet across. Started cutting. The saw went through the drywall easily, but underneath was brick. Old brick. Just like I'd suspected. I told Derek there was nothing back there, just the foundation wall, but he insisted we keep going. We got a hammer and chisel, started working on the brick. It took almost an hour, but we managed to make a hole big enough to see through. I shined my phone's flashlight into the gap, and my blood went cold. There was a room back there, a small room, maybe 10 feet by 10 feet, brick walls, dirt floor. And in the center of the room was a chair, an old wooden chair, with restraints attached to it. Leather straps on the arms and legs, like something you'd see in a horror movie. I pulled back from the hole, looked at Derek. His face was white. I asked if he knew about this. He shook his head, said he had no idea, that none of the disclosure documents mentioned anything about a sealed room in the basement. We should have stopped there. Should have called the police or a contractor or someone who knew what they were doing. But we didn't. We kept going. Made the hole bigger. Big enough to climb through. Derek went first. I handed him the flashlight and watched him squeeze through the opening. I heard him land on the other side, heard him moving around. Then silence. I called his name. No response. I called again. Still nothing. Panic started to set in. I climbed through the hole myself, dropped down into the hidden room. Derek was standing in front of the chair, just staring at it. I walked over to him, asked if he was okay. He didn't respond, didn't even seem to hear me. I grabbed his shoulder and he flinched, like he'd forgotten I was there. He said in a voice barely above a whisper, "Someone was kept here. Someone was locked in this room." I looked around more carefully. There were scratches on the walls, deep gouges in the brick, like someone had clawed at them. And on the floor, partially buried in the dirt, I saw something. I knelt down, brushed away the dirt. It was a piece of metal. A nameplate. The kind you'd see on a military uniform or a work shirt. The nameplate said Helen in stamped letters. Derek saw it too. He picked it up, turned it over in his hands, and then he started shaking. Actually shaking. He said we needed to leave, right now. We needed to get out of that room and never come back. I didn't argue. We climbed back through the hole, got back upstairs. Derek immediately went to his laptop, started searching. Property records, historical documents, anything he could find about the house. It took about an hour, but he found something. A newspaper article from 1962 about a woman named Helen Kowalski who'd gone missing from this neighborhood. She'd been 24 years old, worked at a local factory, lived alone. One day, she just didn't show up for work, didn't show up for anything. Her apartment was empty, no signs of struggle, she'd just vanished. The case went cold, was never solved. Helen Kowalski was declared dead 7 years later, but her body was never found. Derek looked at me. We both knew what we'd found, or at least what we suspected. That room in the basement, the chair with restraints, the nameplate. Someone had kept Helen in that room, kept her prisoner, and she'd probably died down there. We called the police. They came out that same night, went into the basement, saw the hidden room, called in detectives, crime scene investigators. The whole thing turned into a major operation. They excavated the dirt floor in that room, found remains, skeletal remains, buried shallow. The medical examiner confirmed they were human, female, consistent with someone who'd been deceased for several decades. DNA testing would take weeks, but based on the nameplate and the circumstances, they were pretty sure it was Helen Kowalski. The investigation expanded. They looked into who'd owned the house in 1962, found that it had belonged to a man named Richard Marsh. He'd lived there alone, worked as a maintenance supervisor at the same factory as Helen. He'd sold the house in 1965 and moved out of state. Died in Florida in 1989. The police theorized that Richard had abducted Helen, kept her in that sealed room in his basement. For how long they couldn't say. Months, probably. Maybe longer. Until she died. Then he'd buried her body right there, sealed up the room, and lived in that house for 3 more years before selling it and disappearing. The subsequent owners had no idea. The room had been sealed behind brick and drywall, hidden, until Derek bought the house and started measuring, started hearing sounds, started dreaming. Derek moved out immediately, broke his lease. Actually, the bank let him out of his mortgage entirely, given the circumstances. He stayed with me for a few weeks while he found a new apartment. We didn't talk much about what had happened, what we'd found. It was too heavy. But one night, about a week after we'd discovered the room, Derek told me something he hadn't mentioned before. He said the dreams hadn't been just about the wall cracking. In the dreams, after the wall cracked, someone would come through. A woman. She'd look at him, and she'd say, "Thank you." He said the dream stopped after we found the room, after we found Helen, like she'd been trying to tell him, trying to get him to look, to find her, so she wouldn't be forgotten, so her family would know what happened to her. Helen's family, what was left of them, were notified. A niece who was still alive, some distant cousins. They held a funeral. finally gave Helen a proper burial 63 years after she disappeared. Derek and I went, paid our respects. It felt like the right thing to do. The house was torn down a few months later. The property sat empty for a while. Last I heard, someone was planning to build new condos on the lot. I hope they do. I hope that place gets completely erased and rebuilt into something new. Something without that history. Derek's doing better now. He bought a new house in a newer subdivision, nothing built before 2000. He says he sleeps fine now. No more dreams, no more sounds in the night, but I know he'll never fully shake what we found, neither will I. I think about Helen sometimes, about what her last days must have been like. Trapped in that dark room, alone, forgotten. I think about all the people who lived in that house over the years and never knew she was there. Just feet below them, waiting to be found. And I think about Derek, about how the house called to him somehow, how he knew something was wrong even before he had proof, how he couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't function until he found what was hidden. I don't believe in ghosts, not really, but I believe that places can hold on to pain, that terrible things leave marks, and sometimes those marks push through, make themselves known, until someone listens. Derek listened, and because he did, Helen finally got to go home.
This happened last summer, and I'm still trying to convince myself there's a rational explanation. My name is Jordan, and I'm a 31-year-old software engineer living in Portland. My best friend since high school, Marcus, bought a house in southeast Portland about a year ago. It was a beautiful old Craftsman, built in 1915. Original woodwork, stained glass windows, the works. Marcus was so proud of it, gave me the full tour the first time I came over. The house had 3 bedrooms upstairs. Marcus used the master for himself, turned one of the smaller rooms into an office, and the third room, the one at the end of the hall, he set up as a guest room. Said he wanted it ready for when friends and family came to visit. He bought a nice bed, a dresser, put up some art, made it welcoming. I stayed in that guest room for the first time in June. I'd been having some work done on my apartment and needed a place to crash for a few nights. Marcus immediately offered. Said I could stay as long as I needed. I appreciated it. Showed up with my stuff on a Thursday evening. The guest room was nice. Comfortable bed, good natural light from a big window that faced the backyard. Marcus had even put fresh flowers on the dresser. The only thing that felt slightly off was the closet. It was one of those old deep closets with the original door, the kind that doesn't quite close properly. There was about a 2-inch gap even when you pushed the door shut. But that was just old house quirks. Nothing to worry about. The first night was fine. I slept well, woke up refreshed. Marcus and I had coffee together before he left for work. He gave me a spare key and told me to make myself at home. I spent the day working remotely from his dining room table. Evening came. We ordered pizza, watched a movie, normal friend stuff. The second night was when things got weird. I went to bed around 11, read for a bit on my phone, turned off the light around midnight. I was just starting to drift off when I heard something. A creaking sound, like footsteps on old floorboards, but slow, deliberate, coming from inside the room. I opened my eyes. The room was dark, except for some moonlight coming through the window. I didn't see anything, but I heard another creak, definitely inside the room. I reached for my phone, turned on the flashlight, swept it around. Nothing. The room was empty except for me and the furniture. I told myself it was just the house settling. Old houses make noises. I'd lived in old apartments before. This was normal. I turned off my phone light and tried to go back to sleep. But then I heard it again. This time it sounded closer, like someone was standing right next to the bed. I sat up, turned on the lamp on the nightstand. The room flooded with light, empty, completely empty. But the closet door, which had been mostly closed when I went to bed, was now wide open. My heart started beating faster. I got out of bed, walked over to the closet, looked inside. Just hanging space and some storage boxes Marcus had stacked on the shelf. Nothing unusual. I pushed the door closed as much as it would go and went back to bed. I left the lamp on. Figured if I could see the room, I'd feel better. I lay there for probably 20 minutes, staring at the ceiling, feeling foolish for being scared. Eventually, exhaustion won, and I fell asleep. I woke up at 3:17 in the morning. I know the exact time because I immediately looked at my phone. I'd woken up because I felt cold. Not just chilly, actually cold. Like someone had turned the air conditioning down to 50 degrees. I could see my breath in the lamplight. And the closet door was open again, wide open. I definitely remembered closing it. I sat up, pulling the blankets around me, and stared at that open closet. And then I saw something that made my stomach drop. There was someone standing inside the closet. Just standing there in the shadows, not moving. Just standing and facing the room, facing me. I couldn't see details, just a dark figure, human-shaped, silent. I reached for my phone, hands shaking. Called Marcus. He answered after 4 rings, groggy and confused. I told him there was someone in the guest room, someone in the closet. He said he was coming. I heard him come up the stairs, heard him in the hallway. My door opened, and Marcus came in, wearing pajamas and holding a baseball bat. He turned on the overhead light, looked at the closet, looked at me. There was no one there. The closet was empty, just like before. Marcus asked if I was okay, if I'd had a nightmare. I insisted I'd seen someone. He checked the closet thoroughly, moved the boxes, checked the hanging clothes. Nothing, no one. We checked the other upstairs rooms. All empty, all the windows locked. No signs of anyone breaking in. Marcus said maybe I'd been sleepwalking, or had sleep paralysis, that those could cause vivid hallucinations. I nodded, agreed. But I knew what I'd seen. Someone had been standing in that closet, looking at me. Marcus offered to switch rooms with me, let me sleep in the master bedroom, but I felt embarrassed. Didn't want to kick him out of his own bed because I'd gotten spooked. I said I'd be fine. He left the overhead light on for me and went back to his room. I didn't sleep the rest of the night, just lay there watching the closet. The door stayed open. Nothing moved, nothing happened. But I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. When morning came, I was exhausted. Over breakfast, I told Marcus I'd probably head back to my apartment that day, that the work there was mostly done, and I didn't want to overstay my welcome. He said I wasn't overstaying anything, that I was welcome to stay as long as I wanted. But he also didn't push it. I think he could tell something had really freaked me out. I packed my stuff and left that afternoon. Thanked Marcus for his hospitality. Tried to act normal. We made plans to grab drinks later in the week. I went home to my apartment and tried to forget about what had happened. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. About that figure in the closet. About how real it had seemed. About the cold, the open door. All of it. So I did something I probably shouldn't have. I started researching the house. Portland keeps pretty good property records. I found out who'd owned Marcus's house over the years. Found old listings when it had been sold. Looked through historical databases for any mentions of the address. And I found something. An article from 1973. A woman named Claire Donovan had died in that house. She'd been renting the upstairs from the owners who lived on the main floor. She was 29 years old. According to the article, she'd been found dead in her bedroom by the homeowners. The room at the end of the hall, the guest room. The cause of death was listed as suicide. She'd hanged herself in the closet. The article didn't give many details beyond that. Just mentioned that she'd been struggling with depression following a difficult breakup, that she'd left a note, that her family was devastated. I felt sick reading it. Marcus had no idea. I was sure of it. This definitely wouldn't have been in the disclosure documents. It had been over 50 years ago, but someone had died in that room, in that closet, and I'd seen something standing there. I debated whether to tell Marcus. Part of me thought he deserved to know. Part of me thought it would just freak him out for no reason. I mean, what was he supposed to do with that information? He'd already bought the house, already moved in, and nothing bad had actually happened. I'd just had a scare. That was all. I decided not to tell him, at least not right away. We met for drinks that Friday. He asked if I was feeling better, if I'd caught up on sleep. I said yes. We talked about normal stuff, work, dating, sports. I didn't mention what I'd found. About a month later, Marcus texted me. Said his cousin was coming to visit for a long weekend, staying in the guest room. I felt a knot form in my stomach but didn't say anything. Just told him to have fun. After the cousin left, Marcus called me, asked if I wanted to grab lunch. We met at a place near his house. And almost immediately, he brought up something weird. He said his cousin had complained about the guest room, said she'd barely slept, that she kept waking up cold, that the closet door wouldn't stay closed, that she felt like someone was watching her. I felt my throat go dry. Asked what he'd told her. He said he'd told her old houses were drafty and the closet door needed to be adjusted, that she was probably just not used to sleeping in a strange place. But then he looked at me and asked point blank, "Did something happen when you stayed in that room?" I couldn't lie to him anymore. I told him everything. About the footsteps, the cold, the figure in the closet. And then I told him what I'd found about Claire Donovan, about her death in that room in 1973. Marcus went pale. He didn't say anything for a long moment. Then he asked why I hadn't told him sooner. I said I didn't want to freak him out, that I wasn't sure it meant anything. He said that 2 people now had reported the exact same experiences in that room. That couldn't be a coincidence. He asked what I thought we should do. I didn't have a good answer. What do you do when your guest room might be haunted? Call a priest? Sage the house? Tear down the closet? It all sounded ridiculous. Marcus decided to do some investigating himself. He set up a camera in the guest room, one of those night vision ones, left it recording for a full week. Then we watched the footage together. For the first 3 nights, nothing happened. The room stayed still. The closet door moved slightly sometimes with air pressure changes, but nothing dramatic. We were starting to think maybe it had all been in our heads, collective suggestion or something. But on the 4th night, at 3:17 in the morning, the temperature in the room dropped. You could see it on the footage because Marcus had also set up a thermometer in frame. It went from 68 degrees to 42 degrees in less than 2 minutes. And the closet door opened. Not slowly. It swung open fast, like someone had pushed it. And then, for just a few seconds, there was a shadow in the closet. The night vision camera picked it up. A dark shape, human-sized. It didn't move, just stood there, and then it was gone. The temperature went back to normal. The door stayed open. We watched that clip probably 10 times, trying to find some rational explanation, but we couldn't. Something was in that room. Something that appeared at 3:17 in the morning. Something connected to that closet. Marcus called a friend who was into paranormal stuff. She came over with equipment, did a whole investigation. She said the room had what she called residual energy. That traumatic events can leave an imprint on a space. That we weren't seeing a conscious entity, but rather an echo. A recording of what had happened playing over and over. She said the best thing to do was acknowledge it. Speak to it. Let Claire know that she was seen, that she was remembered, that she could rest. It sounded new age and weird, but we were desperate. We tried it. Marcus stood in the guest room and spoke out loud. Said he knew what had happened. That he was sorry for what Claire had gone through. That she didn't need to stay anymore. I don't know if it worked. Marcus doesn't use that room anymore. He keeps the door closed. Uses it for storage now. Set up the guest room in his office instead. He says it's because he needs the extra storage space, But I know the real reason. His cousin won't visit anymore. Says the house gives her bad vibes. Marcus has stopped inviting people to stay over. He's even talked about selling the house, moving somewhere newer, somewhere without history. I feel guilty about that. Like maybe if I'd told him sooner, he could have done something. Could have avoided buying the house in the first place. But how do you tell someone their dream house has a dark past? How do you prove that what you experienced was real and not just your imagination? I still visit Marcus, but I don't stay over. And when I'm there, I avoid looking down that hallway. Avoid thinking about what's in that room at the end of the hall. About who's standing in that closet at 3:17 every morning. About whether Claire is still there, still suffering, still looking for a way out of the pain that led her to that moment in 1973. Marcus showed me something recently. A note he found tucked into a heating vent in the guest room. He was having the HVAC system serviced, and the technician pulled it out. The note was old, yellowed, fragile. The handwriting was shaky but legible. It said, "I'm sorry, I can't do this anymore. The pain won't stop. I hope whoever finds this understands. I hope you're happier than I could be. Please remember me kindly. Claire." It was her suicide note, the one mentioned in the newspaper article. It had been hidden in that vent for over 50 years. And now we had it. Physical proof of what had happened in that room. Marcus framed it. I know that sounds morbid, but he said Claire deserved to be remembered, that her words deserved to be seen. He hung it in the hallway outside the guest room, a small acknowledgement of the life that ended there. I don't know if it made any difference. If Claire somehow knows that we know, that we care, that she's not forgotten. But I hope it did. I hope wherever she is, she's found the peace that escaped her in life. And I hope Marcus finds peace too. In his beautiful old house with its dark history and its room at the end of the hall that no one sleeps in anymore. Because some rooms aren't meant for guests. Some rooms are meant for memory, for honoring the past, for acknowledging that terrible things can happen in ordinary places, and that sometimes those terrible things don't just disappear. They linger, they echo, they wait to be seen. We saw Claire, and now we can't unsee her, and neither, I think, can that house. Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.